That's live.
Hello, puppies and kittens. I've got Rob here, who is a Christian believer, and at some point there was a conversation on Twitter, I guess, weeks ago, where we decided that we should have a chat, and so I wanted to talk about things like evolution, taxonomy, and everything. He being a believer, of course, he wants to go into philosophy, but let's see where we're gonna start off. Give me your perspective to introduce people.
Okay, well, as Aaron said, my name is Rob. My Twitter handle is @RobLovesJC. My YouTube channel is Robert Groen. Groen is my last name. So I've had two debates as Aaron and I were discussing before we went live. I did a debate on a Tuesday with Steve McRae on the Epistemology of atheism, and I did a debate with Jackson Wheat on Wednesday on evolution versus creation. Aaron just recently asked me before we got on the show talking about evolution, but I kindly declined, saying that I just did a 2-hour debate with Jackson on Wednesday and not really up to wanting to debate that again right now. So we're just kind of seeing where it goes, and I think is that a fair...
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
A fair, yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So, my question, I guess, to start things off is, I know that I was raised to be a believer, and it didn't take, and so I have a problem understanding. One of the things I have a problem understanding is when you tell me something, anything, whatever it is. The notion that I need to believe it entirely, without question, reservation, or reason, and that I have to believe it like that, just because it always seems to me that this is the way that you get fooled. So you should always just follow whatever the evidence indicates as far as it goes, accept it only tentatively, be ready to change your mind, and that way you're not going to be duped by frauds.
I agree, and the thing is, like, you might find this strange. You may have heard it before too, but I actually find it frustrating to no end when I hear believers say, "Oh, I just believe in God." I'm like, okay, but why? That's the same question. You're like, say, okay, it's fine if you want to believe in God, but you shouldn't believe in God just because your parents say or your friends believe it. Like, you need to think for yourself too. And I think that's what Aaron is trying to say. Like, don't just believe things blindly, but actually do the work yourself, research for yourself, look into the history. Is there credibility to this? Is it a fraud? Is it a made up story? This is the only way we're going to come to conclusions. You can believe that God exists, or you can believe in God, or you can believe what your parents say, what the priest says, the pastor says, but that's not a good way to live your life. Just blindly believing what other people say. That's actually naive.
Yeah, well, the first issue I would have, I was lied to about pretty much everything when I was a kid. Pertaining
I think we're all
to
lied to some degree when we're kids.
Yeah, well, one of the things I was told was that that God was a conclusively proven scientific fact, and that's why I believe conclusively proven scientific fact.
Well, my family. How can you even scientifically prove an immaterial being? That doesn't even make any sense.
Because we're not talking about a family that is that are scientific. I was not raised by science minded.
Well, as we both know, that just breaks the law of non-contradiction. They can't both be true. You can't. God can't be scientific and immaterial at the same
time. Yeah, well, they didn't have a lot of problems with contradictions. What is it? Excuse me, I have to open the door.
So far we're getting
my job these days is to open the door for dogs.
Okay.
So I was told that there was all this evidence, and what was the evidence? Well, it was all stuff that didn't pan out when you start to explore it. Back in the 70s when I was a kid, we heard a lot about parapsychologists, finding ectoplasm or having it in labs somewhere, these sorts of things where the supernatural is testable scientifically. This is the way that people thought. If magic was real, I often say that.
Hold on a second. How are okay? I'm sure going to get this, but I just want to. Sorry, I'm not trying to interrupt. I just want to. How are people trying to say that the supernatural is you can put it under a microscope? Anyways, I'll let you continue.
Okay. If magic was real, then you would have people like Obi-Wan, Spock, Gandalf, Hermione. You know, they would be able to demonstrate this to some degree of reliability. It would even if we couldn't explain how it works, we would be able to know that it works. But with supernatural things, I'm sorry, what?
There'd be signs and proof. I mean, science is that which is. I think we can both agree. Science is that which is observable, testable, repeatable, right?
Yep. And you would have that if it was real. You'd have Spock being able to do the mind meld thing and all of that stuff. Certainly what the Jedi can do and everything. We can't deny that they're able to do it. We don't know how they're doing it, but we know that they're doing it. But we don't have anything like that with the supernatural really. So what I had when I was growing up is I was told that there's all these experiments or there's all these things that they've been able to show.
So you grew up in a religious house, Aaron?
I wasn't raised by skeptics. I was raised by people who were credulous.
Okay.
I was baptized Mormon, but I was not taught religion. They just expected me to automatically believe everything that they believed without question, and I didn't.
That's just dumb. That they would assume that of you. I mean.
Yeah. So I mean, I was surprised. I didn't know that my parents were creationists until I was an adult.
Are they? Sorry, is your mom still alive?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Is she still a creationist?
Not anymore. She had to get permission from the church to believe in evolution.
What?
Yeah. So, funny thing. She said,
"Oh man, I'm sorry."
Yeah, I mean, she told me.
I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at the church is doing. Just so we're clear.
Yeah. So this is a real conversation that really happened. I'm trying to explain to her the reality of revolution.
I'm just making sure you know I'm not laughing at you. I'm not laughing at the situation you're
explaining. Got it. I'm trying to explain to her what I see as a demonstrable reality with evolution, how many different ways that we can measure and test it and show it and all of that. And she's objecting because she's not allowed to believe that, so she's not going to believe it. And she actually said this sentence to me. She said, "I believe what I believe because that's what I believe. I believe that, and I'm not going to believe what you believe because it's not what I believe."
That's what works for me.
Yes. So having to confront that level of logic, we're still arguing over things. I'm trying to get her to understand things we can prove to be true, and she only wants to believe things that it seems to be that she and a handful of other people that I've met don't want to know things that you can verify to be true in a moment. They only want to believe things that we can prove to be false in a moment. That 30 seconds on Google would disprove that. Yeah. That's what they want to believe.
Here's what I think, Aaron. I want you to, because I was thinking about this quite a bit before I came on your show now, is that I believe that one of the major reasons people will, whatever the reason, whatever the thing that they're presented with is true, that I think that most people will not accept it, not because it's not true, because it is, but I think most people don't like it because it will then they have to rethink about their worldview, their epistemology, and I think most people find that unsettling, uncomfortable, and possibly even destabilizing. What do you think?
I had the opposite experience.
I think generally, I think that's why people tend to push back, whatever the case.
When I let go of God belief, that's when the universe finally made sense. Because God is that one thing that never fit. And I was trying to find ways to work. How does God exist with all this other stuff that seems to fly in the face of everything godly? Yeah. And my conversion to become young Earth Christian, which you mean not young Earth Christian, a reborn Christian. Yeah. Okay. That lasted a number of hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
Walk me through that experience if you don't mind. I mean, of how it only lasted that short of a time.
I know.
Cole's notes.
Yeah. I know a number of people have heard this story before, but bear with me, everybody. So I had a friend in high school who grew up to be an ordained Southern Baptist minister and the principal of a Christian school, who teaches that the Bible is the only source of truth in our world. Let all else be a lie. That's yeah. So
even I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. So, I wouldn't go that far.
Yeah. So this guy, when we were in high school.
So for example, like even a math book can't be true. I mean, that's just too far.
Yeah. Well, I've encountered people like that who believe that there's no such thing as atoms, or who take the route of Descartes. And it's funny that Descartes is famous for saying,
"What? How can you say that there's no such thing as atoms and expect people to take you seriously?"
Descartes, right? He says, I think, therefore I am. That's what he was famous for. But later in the same book, he starts questioning his own existence and says that the only thing he can be sure of is that God exists, and he's not so sure about himself.
Well, how can you know that God exists if he doesn't exist?
I'm wondering, how did people take that quote and apply this to Descartes' moniker when he contradicted himself later in the same book?
Taking things out of context to fit their own philosophy and
theology. Yeah, it's like your headstone slogan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is strange because he contradicted it later.
Oh, can I just tell you a quick joke? The headstone just actually brought that. There was a headstone of like this the recipe for a cookie that because the wife said over my dead body, so now she's dead. So there's a recipe for the mom's favorite.
Okay, so I was very spiritual kid because partially because I was raised in SoCal. So I grew up in Los Angeles, like in the 70s, and so that was everybody was super spiritual.
There's a huge spiritual movement in this.
Exactly, right. So here I am in LA, just buried in hippies and spiritualism and woo. And everybody's encouraging me to believe every damn thing that I read. And I don't get any kind of scientific skepticism. I was told that skeptics are cynics who miss out on the big picture.
Can I just interrupt you for a second? Because there's a point. Even the Bible says don't believe everything. The Bible actually says test things. So anyways,
yeah, but there's a context there.
Of course,
we can talk about. We can talk about something, but that doesn't actually mean the way that you mean. But we can talk about that later.
Okay.
So, in exploring spirituality, I finally fall under the influence of my friend, who convinces me, and I can't remember the prequel of all this, how he gets me to accept Jesus as my savior and all of that. Pardon me, my job is to open door for dogs.
I remember.
Cannot be a serious podcaster with all these fucking dogs in my studio. Anyway, so in doing that, and I've heard other people describe this moment of elation. You have the final thing where you make the statement, and the moment of euphoria. I'm like floating around the house in a daze for a couple of hours. I mean, just all of that kind of thing that I've heard other people talk about too. And strangely, I've heard people make the same kind of comments for other religions as well.
Oh yeah.
I remember reading a testimony from this woman in Thailand who said that, who talks about how she was down in the gutter, she was at the bottom of her luck, and that's what religion preys on, right? When you're you're most emotionally susceptible, and then everything turned around the moment she accepted Buddha into her life. So it's the same story, just a different continent.
Yeah.
But
I mean, and I've heard that Muslims accept a lot of theology based on dreams, which I think is a horrible way to go about your life. What if I have a dream about murdering my best friend? Am I supposed to act on that, or am I subjectively choosing which dreams I want to act on?
Much of the Bible is written based on dreams.
That's true.
So that's disturbing. I mean,
there is.
we don't need to talk about dreams and how unreliable that is. But
No.
when I accepted Jesus and everything, here I am as a Christian, and I'm kind of, there's no drugs involved, but I'm kind of stoned on the endorphins of the experience, I guess. And then in a moment of clarity, because it matters what is true. That it doesn't, what I want to believe is irrelevant. It matters whether it's true or not.
Agreed.
And if it turns out that I believe something because I thought there was evidence for it, and then I find out that the evidence is faulty, or that the evidence was made up, that it's not reliable, I've already stopped believing it. So I am thinking about how are the different ways that we could fool ourselves into believing in Christian. I've already read Hindu books by this time. 3 years earlier, I was considering Krishna, for example. So I mean, I'd read the Science of Self-Realization by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, all of that. So I've had a little bit of comparative religious experience. I know how these people go through their conversion experience. It's very similar. I don't want to be fooled into believing things that are not evidently true. I don't want to be fooled into believing anything completely if it's not true. And how do you know if it's true? So the best thing to do is just be tentative. So in this moment of clarity, I asked my friend, how do I know that this feeling of elation, this euphoria that I'm experiencing, how do I know that this is really the power of Jesus and not some trick of the mind or some other influence? He grabs me by both shoulders with a huge beaming smile. I've told this story so often, and said, just keep telling yourself it's Jesus until you believe it.
That's horrible. I can't. Oh, man. This stuff makes me cringe.
He actually said the phrase.
No, I believe
fake it till you make it.
I know.
30 years later, he said that phrase. When I met him again, I went to go, meet up. Hey, we haven't seen each other in decades. We go to have a talk. And this is when he tells me, fake it till you make it. This is his faith.
Yeah. Well, it's like
going to the dishonesty of that.
Yeah, that'd be like me going to a martial art dojo and just saying, hey guys, I'm a black belt in karate. I'll fake it till I make it. And then I get laid out on the mat by my master. That won't work so well.
Yeah. I've lived that experience. A friend of mine told me that he was a brown belt in some fucking thing. I can't remember what it was. But when he tried to jump on me and show off, one punch down and out.
Wow. Yeah.
I felt really bad. He shouldn't have been bragging like that.
You know what? I think a real martial artist will not reveal his strength unless it's necessary.
Yeah. But I don't need to talk about. I have stories about that too. But that's a distraction.
We're getting a little sidetracked here.
Yeah. So the whole thing is, there has to be some truth to it. When I argue with creationists, and they want to say that, evolution's a fairy tale, I can show them the verifiable, observable, measurable, testable fact. And they'll make up all kinds of excuses or whatever to get out of it. But here's the truth of it. I can show that this is real. And now let's see how much further it goes. And very quickly into this exercise, they start acting like their feet are on fire. And they can't be here anymore. But when I want to see the truth of their belief, well, there's nothing to show. You just already got to believe before you believe, which makes no damn sense.
I mean, well, to some degree, we all have to make assumptions about our epistemology. Would you not agree with that?
To some degree, maybe, but I mean, I'm looking for the truth of something, so I need to be able to show. And I'm not saying that it has to be absolute. There's very few absolutes. Okay, so I need sufficient. There's got to be
a little bit of faith in everything because there can't
I don't. No, faith is when you believe without evidence.
No, we have different definitions.
Yeah, I wrote an article on that where I quoted close to 100, I think. Let's be generous. Maybe it was only about 50.
Okay, I'll replace the
hymns, sermons, theologians, past and present, philosophers, all giving the same definitions of faith. They're paraphrased different ways, but it's always you're convinced, and it's not because of evidence. You didn't come to this position because of evidence. You're not changing your mind because of evidence. You believe in an erroneous assumption of authority. and that's why you believe.
Okay, well, again, then I'll replace the word faith with assumptions. We all have to make assumptions to some degree about our epistemology.
You say to some degree.
Yes.
But in order for me to, if you want to present anything to me and you want me to accept it as true, show me the truth of it. Show me what I can verify to be true. Sufficient reason to compel or convince.
Yes, reason. Okay, but that I'm glad you said that, because obviously, as we both know, there's a difference between reason and evidence and proof. All those two things are different.
My definition of proof is an overwhelming preponderance of evidence.
I would agree with that.
Not entirely different.
Well, I mean, I can use reasons to infer evidence and proof, but they're not one and the same.
Well, and if I say reasons, I can be talking about evidence, and usually will be.
You can,
but I will also accept logic.
Yeah. Like I would hope you would assume that, and that it's logically absurd for infinite regress to be possible.
I'm sorry. What we're trying to make infinite regress possible? What?
No, I'm saying it's impossible. Infinite regress is impossible.
Okay.
But the thing is, you can't prove it, but it's just illogical.
Okay.
That's
okay. So that's your example of using
an example, yeah.
Okay. When you don't have evidence of something, you at least have logic for something.
Yeah.
So in arguing with believers on the daily for about a quarter century, I have never yet heard evidence nor logic that implies a God. Every logical argument, it seems that at least one of the premises, if not all of them, are not necessarily true. But then they usually also jump to a non sequitur as the conclusion.
Have you ever seen Frank Turek debate anything?
Oh, yes. That was the first professional creationist I ever met. I'm sorry that I'm not accustomed to meeting people like that. They had to remove me from the room. The people who were hosting the event, who were atheists, had to remove me from the room because of my rage. I am so embarrassed about that. Okay. Professional fraud and huckster.
Okay, well,
I was livid with this guy.
Okay, so let me ask you. Okay, I'll just open the floor to you. What were the things that Turk said that you vehemently disagreed with?
He was the one that illustrated for me how religious belief is just the question-begging fallacy, bolstered by other fallacies, the arguments from ignorance and incredulity, but centered on the question-begging fallacy. So he did, for one thing, let me start with the first thing. The ultimate lie, the conflation, the equivocation of saying in his book, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. He's deliberately mixing contexts so that if you, like Ray Comfort does, where you say that, well, do you have faith in your wife? Yeah, but that's not a belief that is assumed without evidence, is it? That's based on evidence.
I will say that's also a false equivalence.
Well, equivocation is when you take two different contexts,
and
mix them with deceptive effect, and so that's what Comfort does. That's what. But
the thing is, I'd agree that faith with my wife is much different than faith in the existence of an immaterial being. That's a false equivalence. 100%.
Yes, but it's also different contexts, because when you have faith in your wife, you're only talking about trust.
Yeah, but Ray Comfort always tries to equate faith with trust.
I know, because he did the same thing with me in our debate. And the one proud moment I have in talking with him was when I told him that the only ability, the only superpower he had was in pretending that he couldn't understand simple concepts. That is his greatest strength.
I'll just say this, that I think trust is a part of faith, but it's definitely only a part of faith.
Yeah, but again, it's not that we reveal a fact and you verify that this fact is in fact true, and it's verifiable, and you can't deny it. You're like, well, this means this supports this, and it eliminates that, or either or. Yeah, and then you realize that
we're not talking about faith, we're talking about facts.
The data implies this. I was believing that. Turns out my belief is wrong. Turns out this other thing is correct.
Damn it! The logical thing to do is to adjust my thinking and rational from what I thought was true to what is true.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But with religion, with religious faith, you don't do that. You find an excuse whereby you were still right. You just ignore the data. And I'm seeing a lot of this, not just in religion now. You lose an election, just don't admit you lost the election. You get caught raping somebody, just don't admit that you even knew her.
Yeah.
Never admit the truth. Just keep telling the same lie, no matter how much of, no matter how often it's proved.
I don't know if you may have heard this because you're in the States, but apparently there's over 700 confirmed cases of sexual abuse in the Southern Baptist Convention, which is the largest denomination in the United States.
Yeah, if you want to hear my perspective on that, I've often said that you know how you tell the difference between the Protestant clergy and the Catholic clergy? By which gender of children they molest.
Oh my God, that's horrible. That's horrible. I don't know why I'm laughing. That's horrible. But it's so funny. It's horrible. It's so horrible. It's kind of funny too.
Yeah. Funny because it's true.
Yeah, I mean that's what makes something true. Every joke has an element of truth to it.
Yeah. So you've got the Protestant youth pastor.
Yeah.
You know which gender he went for, and we know that the Catholics have a thing for choir boys.
Exactly.
So there you go.
Yeah.
So,
but as we both know, not every pastor is gonna fiddle their kid too.
I don't make those kind of generalities.
Okay, I'm just making sure. I'm just making sure we're on the same board here. Okay.
I don't do the broad brush thing that. I have known people who were genuinely good people, and I lament that they are religious. I understand why they're religious, because they were raised to think that good equals God. And if you're a good, decent humanitarian person, you care about humanity and all of that, then you're gonna end up in a Christian denomination because of the way our culture works.
Okay, well,
that doesn't necessarily. That doesn't mean.
Okay, let me ask you a question, Aaron. What do you think good is, and by what standard do you measure good by?
There was a video that explained this so perfectly that I never even tried to do a follow-up for it. Scott Clifton did a video called A Treatise on Morality, in which he explained it eloquently. When we're talking about good and evil, we are talking about antisocial and prosocial behaviors. And there are reasons why a thing is good or evil. It's not because God said so. You don't have an objective moral standard if your objective standard is the subjective opinion of your God, or worse, the subjective opinion of whatever mouthpiece is pretending to speak for your God.
But I could easily flip that on atheism and say the same thing, that you can't make an objective. Hold on, you can't.
Yeah, no, you can't. The reason you can't is the reason I just gave, because we have reasons why something is good or bad.
Okay, but let me finish. My supposition is that for atheists, okay, obviously we're ruling God out of the equation. Obviously. Okay, so if my morality is different than your morality, and humans are the standard of morality, then who are you to say that your morality is better than my morality?
How is your if it's objective that we both agree?
Objective when we're just both humans?
Right. For the reason I just gave, that good is pro-social behavior, evil is antisocial behavior, also known as apathetic selfishness. So we can determine what fits into either criteria. We don't need a God to determine what is moral and what isn't. We have the simplest possible rule to discover what is moral and what isn't. And when we have this objective standard, we realize we can take this standard and look at God and realize he's not moral at all. Not the biblical God, and definitely not the Muslim God either.
I agree with you on that one.
Yeah. So when you realize that it is evil or wrong to cause unnecessary harm or suffering or whatever, and it's moral or good to promote happiness, well-being, and so forth. I mean, these are the things that we get our endorphins from. They're socially, there's a payback.
Those are
for
the things that are promoted by Christ in the New Testament as well.
No, Christ has no relevance to this at all. Jesus was, at best, a first-century faith healer who didn't know what pathogens caused diseases. He thought that diseases were caused by demons, and so he pretended to exorcise things that did not exist. And then he tried to cure blindness and do things that other modern faith healing frauds still do to this day. That's what Jesus was doing in the first century.
Oh, Jesus is a fraud?
Yes.
Interesting.
He thought that diseases were caused by demons. This is not the guy to take medical advice from.
Well, he didn't claim to be a physician.
He did claim to be divine, which he
claim to be
clearly
divine,
was not.
yes.
Yeah, so we can argue about the lack of divinity for Jesus if you
Well,
want. But I mean, I think
just-
that would be another sidetrack.
Yeah, I think that would be it wouldn't be fruitful for this.
Because we have Peter Popov, we have Reverend Bobby Tilton, we have Kenneth and Gloria Copeland, we have other Jesus-I still existing today, still running the same scam that Jesus did, just more effectively.
They're the people who give Christianity a bad name altogether. It's because
who gives Christianity a good name?
Not enough people. Some people.
We got a shit ton of bad name people.
Oh yeah, for sure we do.
Yeah, you'd think that God would weed out his PR department, right?
Well, that's what I think the exposing of all this crap is doing. I think that's what God is doing, weeding them out.
Why then do we have? Let's go a little deeper.
Okay.
Why would you have? Oh, just think about this. You're a god. Imagine you're a god. You're not just any god. You're the uber galactic god of all everything. Okay. So the anthropic principle, if you like, you created the universe for life, except that no one can live anywhere but right here. A portion of the skin of this one mote of dust. That's what we're stuck to. Everything else is way too far away to get to by even with the pinnacle of technology. And even if we could get someplace else, it wouldn't be good enough. We're only attuned to this, and we can only live here temporarily. So the universe will kill us everywhere else we go instantly.
But what's wrong with living on this planet?
That's just the beginning of it. The idea of an uber cosmic god, uber galactic god, he could have created a continual plane. So we'd have an infinite wilderness that we could play on. But no, didn't. Created all these little motes of dust floating in various sunbeams.
Yeah, but...
And everywhere else, everything between them, everything is poisonous. And even the other motes of dust are also poisonous. Instantly will kill us everywhere that we go. And then this God who supposedly loves us, and how do we know this? Because the people collecting our money and fucking our children tell us that he loves us and will continue to love us as long as we continue giving them money and children.
Well, come on, you said you weren't into generalizations, and you're making generalizations now.
Am I talking about what the clergy has always done?
No, but I'm just saying we're both established that
not every clergyman does this, but the clergy has always done this.
Yes, to that I will agree.
Okay. Every religion tells a story that is bullshit. There is no truth to any religion. Not one thing that we can show to be true, but there's a hell of a lot of lies in all of them. And the ultimate one for Christianity is the notion that this God who supposedly loves us is so inexplicably insecure that he will damn us for perpetual, merciless, relentless, unforgiving torture for all eternity, not for anything we did that was good or bad. It would be bad enough if he was judging on moral things, because there's no collection of crimes you could commit in a single lifetime that would be worth an eternity of punishment. You could be Hitler to the power of a Google, and you would never be worth that much torture. But this is not what God judges on. God doesn't give a shit about whether you're good or bad. All that matters to the Christian God is what or whether you believed. That's all.
That belief has to be followed up by action too.
No, it doesn't. Tell me under what circumstances a good and righteous, decent person who is an atheist, who can be charitable to his fellow man, but never believed a word of God, never believed any scripture at all, blasphemed the Holy Spirit, but is a total humanitarian, that man is going to hell. But Jeffrey Dahmer and Adolf Hitler are having tea in heaven together right now, aren't they?
I doubt that. Well, Jeffrey might be. I doubt Adolf is.
Why not? Adolf was always Christian.
He's
He never.
You can't say you're a Christian and kill 6 million people, man. Come on.
He always only ever identified as a traditional Catholic. He said he was a Christian. He said he was Catholic. He never, ever, ever, ever relented this.
Yeah,
he complained about how the Christian power structure was getting in the way of his plans. That he did do.
You are aware that Jesus said that people will know his disciples by their fruit, right? That means their actions. So you can't say you kill.
Go tell Christians which Christians are Christian and which Christians are not.
I'm saying you can't kill 6 million people and then say you're doing it in the name of Jesus.
Yeah, you obviously can.
Okay, you can say that.
Hitler declared.
You can't be.
Hitler declared that his entire motivation was based on religion, not on scientific knowledge, but on religious belief. The Kristallnacht, he specifically attributed that to the works of Martin Luther and his book, The Jews and Their Lies.
Are you aware that Hitler was also a huge proponent of evolution and say that we were...
No, I'm aware that Hitler rejected evolution outright. He mentioned it only one time. And he mentioned it in the what is it? I forget which chapter it was. The first part, I think, in Mein Kampf. He mentions it only once, where he rejects it outright. He said he gave all the creationist arguments. He said that you can only have evolution within a kind, but that a variation between kinds was impossible, and belief in macroevolution would be a sin against the eternal creator. Hitler was a creationist.
Okay.
He rejected evolution outright.
Okay. I'll recant that. I guess that would kind of fit with his extermination of the Jews. But that was entirely based on Martin Luther. Okay, well, extermination.
Martin Luther did the thing. Did you hear how Martin Luther wanted to baptize Jews?
But 1 second. I want to finish my thought first. I was going to say that natural selection, I thought, was Hitler's end game too, but I could be wrong in that. Apparently I am. But anyways, go on. What about Martin Luther?
Well, I don't know that somebody's saying that Hitler killed himself and that's unforgivable, but who really pays attention to their own theology?
No, I mean, the Bible only says that blaspheming the Spirit is unforgivable, so suicide's not.
Yeah, and then they try to convince me to become Christian anyway, even though I've already blasphemed the Spirit. So you're not paying attention to your own theology, are you? Everybody thinks that they have a loophole to get around it. And everybody thinks that their God already knows why they did whatever they did and has already forgiven them. So
yeah, there's a lot of bad theology, a lot of bad thinking. I'm not going to dispute that.
The death penalty is useless against religious people.
That's true.
Because they think they're as soon as they die, their God is going to take them out to golf. Because God understands why. Yeah, that sucker deserved what you did to him. I fully understand.
Yeah, I think when it comes to epistemology and the moral issue, I think every philosophy can mess you up in the head if you let it. I mean, not the philosophy will, but I think people can get messed up in their own head and think, okay, I'm going to heaven, so it doesn't matter how I live. But atheists can also say the same thing. Oh, there's no God, so I can live however I want to. So I'm not saying you don't. I'm just saying the philosophy can go either way. That's all.
Okay. People can be shitty either way. I'll give you that. But as far as atheist philosophy, the philosophy of atheism is I don't believe you. That's pretty much it. So throughout history, there's been way too much attention paid by theologians and sovereign leaders over what or whether you believe. Do you believe in God? That's all they care. That's a yes or no question. If the answer is no,
Aaron, can you hold on 1 second? I just want to plug. Okay. I gotta move my laptop. I gotta plug it in so I don't my battery doesn't die. Right.
All right.
Just gonna unstop my camera for a sec.
Yeah. He's so much more professional than I am. I only have to put up with a bunch of fucking dogs. By the way, while we were taking this break, Goose Island, Bourbon County. This is my favorite beer I can get in the States. 14.6% ABV, really good on pancakes. Try it like that. It's about as thick as pancake syrup and just about as sweet. I'm seeing someone named Kermit Thorson in the chat. I'm loving that name. Both halves of that name. All right. And while he's doing that, I'm going to check a couple of comments. I don't have any super chats or anything to read. Let me see. What was that? Of course, abiogenesis is true. We're here. It's how you. Yeah.
All right. Well, I made the mistake one time of having a webcam and not having my charger, and it wasn't a good idea. This thing takes a lot of battery power, man.
All right. Well,
I'm good to go. My laptop's charging, so no worries.
Okay, so I don't remember what I was saying. Maybe you were saying something.
You were saying something about Martin Luther, and then.
Oh yes, how Martin Luther wanted to baptize Jews was to take them to the top. I know
he was an anti-Semite, but
yeah, he tie a stone or a millstone around their neck and throw them off the bridge. That's how he wanted to.
That's pretty literal, like very twisted words of Christ.
Yeah, this was Hitler's hero. Mm-hmm. Hitler's non-Catholic but still Christian hero. So yeah,
that's horrible.
Yeah. So one of the things that really frustrates me about the religious lies is one that I've heard all my life is how Hitler was supposedly a Darwinist, totally not, and how Darwin.
Well, I guess that I retract that statement. I believe what you're saying,
and how Darwin was supposed to be a eugenist. But if you read the books of either men, you realize no, there's no part of either of those.
No. Darwin was not a eugenist. That's just dumb.
Yeah. So what I hear it a lot. I
believe you. I'm with you.
Somebody was telling me yesterday.
As a believer, that's just dumb. He was not a eugenist.
Somebody was telling me like yesterday.
He wasn't even a biologist.
Somebody was telling me yesterday that I was stupid for not accepting that Darwin was this racist eugenist, like they were taught to believe, because they couldn't question what they were taught to believe. And here I am bringing them contrary evidence.
It's a straw man because what people are trying to attribute to is that atheism leads to racism.
Yeah,
it's not atheism, evolution.
Yeah, so one of the things that Darwin wrote, I mean, when people want to tell me how racist Darwin was, they bring me exactly one quote, and this is the early part of Descent of Man, where he talks about higher and lower forms. The sad thing is that it was the 19th century. He was quoting Linnaeus, and
who's Linnaeus?
Everybody throughout anthropology at the time was grotesquely racist.
Okay, so
but Darwin in Descent of Man, he's speaking in the language.
The guy you're talking about, Linnaeus, who is he? I'm not familiar with him.
Carolus Linnaeus. In 1735, he wrote a book on the systematic classification of life. So he created taxonomy.
Okay.
Which was the first evidence of evolution, and it was terribly interesting for me because he had no idea how to explain the thing that he saw. So he creates that he starts categorizing all of these things systematically and realizes that they're in a series of descendant groups, like a family tree, which does not fit with creationism at all. But he was a creationist. He had no way of explaining why does it look like this. These are not created kinds. This is something different. This is a descended, nested hierarchy, descendant ancestry. And he couldn't explain it. It was 100 years later, because Carolus Linnaeus was thinking that this would require that new species could appear without being special creations by God. He thought that that's the only way that a new species could appear. That you can have different breeds of dogs or different breeds of parrots, different breeds of different kinds of plants that you can interbreed, but it's only so far. Once you get into different species, well, then they're no longer interfertile.
Yeah, well, I mean that's
so he's saying
no one with half a brain would deny microevolution.
Well, actually, I've met people with plenty less than half a brain. Kent Hovind, for example.
I will just tell you right now that if anyone denies microevolution, which is variation and adaptation with the species, you can't take that person seriously.
Kent Hovind and Rick Comfort both talked about what's funny thing is that they both, and Ken Ham, accept macroevolution without not understanding what it is, but they reject microevolution because they don't understand what it is either. So they reject that mutations are the ultimate source of new genetic information in the genome.
Yeah, but
By rejecting,
but isn't mutations almost always a disadvantage?
no,
Huh?
the vast majority of them are neutral. And so
okay.
natural selection actually applies to very little of evolution. Most evolution is genetic drift, the vast majority of it. So what evolution does is it does not change one thing into another fundamentally different thing, which is what all the creationists argue.
Yeah,
Evolution
it's like well, I mean, so you would say that it's fundamentally flawed for a creationist to think that over time a hippo could be aquatic.
The hippos are aquatic already.
No, sorry, no, man. Let me give you sorry, that example. Like, let's say, I don't know, a lizard can become completely aquatic.
Well, yes, we have mosasaurs and so forth, but here's the thing: it's not
let
single
land dwelling animal can become aquatic.
What you're trying to look at is one lineage. I'm trying
Yes.
to tell you that it's not one lineage.
Okay.
It's one original species of whichever level you want to start from.
Yeah.
You end up with one original template, and then that produces two distinct subsets. Maybe one is still a continuation of the other, and there's a new species beside it. Maybe they're both new species than what their ancestors were.
Yeah.
But they're subsets. They're modified.
Would you say that the subsets would eventually allow for a land-dwelling animal to become aquatic?
Absolutely. I've got a couple of videos that I'd love to show you on that, where I explain like the evolution of whales in detail.
Or do you send me the link in you send me the link in either email or Twitter?
Sure, I'd love to share that with you. But the point that I'm trying to get to is you start with the original form, and then from that you get two descendant forms. They're subsets of the original, but they're both different from each other.
But how do we get to that point? How did we get to the new information in the genetic code that would allow
mutations provide all the new information?
Okay, but
not because recombination also provides.
But I thought you said mutations are mostly neutral.
Mutations are mostly neutral, so most evolution is by genetic drift.
Okay, just for the sake of the audience, explain what genetic drift is.
Okay, so in every population, you have mutations. In every individual, you have a series of mutations occurring. Most of the time, in the parent gene pool, the new genetic information will be suppressed. So it's going to want to go for the standard template. Okay. So new variants, novel traits, for example, will usually be repressed or suppressed. But in smaller populations, when you take one globally interbreeding population isn't going to evolve very fast, but you take a small population thereof, and now novel expression of new genes will be much more quickly revealed. And so if you take one original population and you separate them into two groups, in just not too many generations later, you can tell. If I were to take an example from one of those and show it to you, you'd be able to tell which population it came from, because the mutations that occur in the Eastern group are not the same mutations that occurred in the Western group. And so you'll be able to see the difference.
Okay, oh man, I had something on the top and I forgot. It just slipped my mind. Man, like I said, I'm kind of deep. But yeah, maybe it'll come to me later. Probably comes to me when I'm not trying to think about it.
If I can jump back to Darwin for a minute.
Yeah,
one of the things that I really liked about him, he figured out something, that it didn't matter who he was. He could have been. He was part of the aristocracy. He was from a rich
speaking
family.
of Darwin, I just want to ask you a question, because I think most atheists have refuted this, but I've heard that Darwin recanted evolution on his deathbed.
Lady Hope told a lie, like creationists do for a living. Lady Hope pretended to be at his bedside, where she said that he recanted on just before he died. However, each of Darwin's children said, essentially, the fuck is that bitch talking about? She wasn't even here.
Okay. Like I said, it's something I heard, so I didn't know one way. What things I'm ignorant about, I withhold judgment.
No worries. The thing about Darwin,
I think that's a wise position to take.
He was
not sure.
Indeed, respect. So Darwin was what he was raised in the most ethnocentric culture, like in history till that time, the British
I
Empire.
heard that Darwin was a believer for a while too before he.
He was originally going to be a minister.
Okay, I didn't know that. But no,
He went to King's College. He was going for a theology degree.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is something I've read. I've read that the death of his daughter was one of the main events in his life that kind of pushed him in the direction that he took for the rest.
I wouldn't say that it was a main event in his life. It wasn't.
One of the events.
I understand the import that you're talking about here. He was the trip to the trip around the world, the 5-year voyage around the world was the biggest event of his life.
Yes,
that's where he got the understanding of evolution, which was the biggest thing that ever happened to him. It's a I think much smaller thing that the way his favorite daughter died. And I say favorite only because
tragedy usually plays into the question of if God exists or he's good, then why would you?
Yeah, it was the injustice of how she died that on the tail end of everything else that he already understood. Her death caused him to say, I can't believe in this God thing anymore.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah. Tragedy spurred on his scientific pursuit.
Yeah, he never identified as atheist. I would have called him an atheist because he didn't believe. But he had this thing with Huxley. His best friend was Huxley, and Huxley had this weird ass issue with atheists. So Huxley did not like that atheists that people of his thought were saying that there's no reason to believe this, therefore it's not true. And Huxley is saying you can't proclaim that there is no God just because there's no evidence of God. Well, it's not just that there's no evidence for God. It's also that there's all this evidence against God, and there's all this other logical shit too. But Huxley was reacting to something. He didn't like the people of his times making this claim. Yeah. So he made up this word based on bad etymology, where he came up with the word agnostic. And I admire virtually everything Huxley ever wrote, but his invention of the word agnostic has irritated me to the core. It's such
Is it different than what we actually know it to be today?
It doesn't make any sense. Because
are you saying his definition doesn't, the position doesn't?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense through the etymology nor for the logic.
Okay.
So
just because we're briefly touching on it, and I don't want to get too much into it, but how would you defend the epistemology of atheism, of like no God and life coming into it?
Okay, there's no epistemology in I don't believe you.
Well, no, but I mean like okay, like
so what is atheism? Atheism is not theism. Okay. So if theism is believing impossible nonsense for no good reason just because you were told to, atheism is not that.
Okay. So how do you explain everything we have around us?
I don't need to.
Well, I mean, that's not really a good answer.
No, I said one. That means there's a two coming.
Okay.
Nobody does a list of one.
Okay, fair enough.
But really, I don't need to. We had atheists, really good atheists, millennia ago, who couldn't explain a damn thing, but knew that they didn't believe in a God. Atheism was formally defined. What's that?
That doesn't prove it one way or the
other. How do you prove a negative?
Well,
how do I prove to you that I don't believe you? You're making an unsupported assertion of impossible nonsense, which you believe for no good reason. I don't believe you. How do I prove I don't believe you?
Well, I can prove that 2 minus 4 is still -2. That's proving a negative.
Okay. We're talking about a claim of a magic invisible being who has infinite magical powers and can conceal himself from all logic, evidence, or reason. It creates a logical conundrum. Yes, if this God existed, he would make sure that we would never know that he existed. But there's no reason to believe he existed. Period. Ever. And there's plenty of really good reasons not to believe that he existed. There's even substantially good reasons to believe that he does not exist.
Such as?
The fact that every scripture is 1, false, 2, horribly detrimental, 3, violently conflicting with every other.
You know that for like there is that okay, even if you don't believe in the Gospels, that Jesus is a historical figure. This is like indisputable fact of history.
I wouldn't say that.
You don't have to.
Okay. I accept. You can't say that somebody who's not mentioned in history at all is an indisputable figure of history.
Well, there's like 100 sources outside the Bible that
100 sources that mention Christianity, that mention Christians, but that don't specify anything about
Christian
Jesus.
people, though.
Right? They're not talking about Jesus. What Jesus is reputed to be, the King of the Jews, for example, not one mention anywhere ever. No history of that at all. Jesus was, as I said earlier, at best, he was a first century faith healer and a fraud. An ignorant fraud who didn't know any better than any other first century ignorant fraud.
You're going to stand for that one day, but we're not going to get into that.
Except that I'm not, because there's no afterlife, because we don't have souls.
You
and
can't
we're
know that.
Certain about
you
that.
Can't
yeah,
know that.
We can, actually. I've
Wow.
interviewed so many neurophilosophers and neuroscientists that, yeah, all of them universally say, yeah, there is no support for mind-body dualism. There is no indication that a soul could exist, but there's substantial evidence that the soul does not exist.
And you can
so
know
no, there is no heaven and hell. There is no God. We have no souls. Jesus was a fraud. He didn't know shit.
And you know this for
and
certain.
He wasn't alone. He was one of many frauds, and some of his legend was linked in with other people's legends.
And the links are, and I would like you to give me proof and evidence for everything you just said.
All right, email me one at a time, one request at a time. I'll present it for you.
Okay.
And every question you ask, I won't run out.
Well, the things that you just said, like no God, no heaven, no hell. No
yeah,
Jesus,
I did just give you reasons for that.
No, I mean, like, I want you to give, like, that. Those are reasons, but those aren't concrete evidence.
What is concrete evidence? Are we evidence is a body of facts that are positively indicative of and or exclusively concordant with one available conclusion or hypothesis above any other, right?
Fair.
Okay. Yeah, I got that. And so evidence against God, I got that. Evidence for God, nobody's got that.
Okay. Well, yeah, email me some stuff, or email me some stuff about what we're talking about. That'd
okay. Just ask a specific question to get a specific answer.
All right, I'll do that in my email.
All right, so I forget where we were at this point. Oh yes, I was derailing over to. It could have been that Darwin could have been just like you would expect of a 19th century English aristocrat. That he could have been an ethnocentric piece of shit, super racist. Yeah, because the British Empire in the 1800s, they were so fucking pompous. They were the United States.
They were
what the United States became 100 years later.
Yeah,
right. They were just as arrogant and self-centered as we are. They thought they were the shit.
There's still a lot of racism in your country and mine too. It's just, it's better than it was before, but it's
Canada.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of racism here.
Yeah. But anyway, it could have been that Darwin was exactly what you would expect. You know, the Victorian Englishman, you know, the pompous, all of that.
I just heard someone call someone the N-word in the Tim Hortons across the road from me a few weeks ago. So,
yeah. The last time I went to go visit to any kind of a family reunion, I get to hear the N-word multiple times over dinner.
It drives me crazy, man.
Yeah, but anyway, it could have been.
Too, but anyways,
it could have been that Darwin was your typical
racist
British imperialist aristocrat asshole.
Yeah, he could have been.
Fortunately, it turned out he was not that. But it wouldn't have mattered for his observation. He could have been. He could have been a complete absolute dick. He could have been a child molesting fiend. The fact that he discovered this thing that he discovered would still be valid, regardless what an asshole he could have been. It just conveniently, for me, it turned out he wasn't that. He was almost inexplicably, surprisingly, not that. Mm-hmm. He seemed to be, from my analysis, the least racist person of his day.
Probably. I don't know. Like I don't.
His book on his first book, not The Origin of Species, but his first book on the Voyage of the Beagle, when he was still a Christian, he always only ever advocated for the indigenous peoples and berated his own race, his own imperialism. He was against all of it. He said he would never again visit a slave country. He talked about the double standard, about the way that we judge people, the way that if this person is brown and they do this thing, we berate them for it. But if that person had been white, he said, if that person had been white, she would have been regarded as a hero.
Yeah, but the Jesuits, I think, only regarded a black person as 1/4 of a person back in the day, too. Before Darwin.
It wasn't just the Jesuits. It was 1/5 of a person by the United States government.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah. So this is one of the reasons that Charles Darwin would not come to this country, because we still had legal slavery here.
Yeah, he was British, right? Yeah.
But the thing is that to see these studies where it wouldn't have mattered if he was racist or not, because everybody was racist in his day.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the thing he was going for wouldn't have mattered what kind of a person he was character-wise, anyways.
Exactly. But the thing was that just coincidentally he happened not to be. And so the strange coincidence is
it always helps
he is constantly berated for having been racist when he was not. If he was, I would so admit it. If he'd said racist shit in his books, I would admit that. But the thing is
it always helps your character is good to boot, though. It always helps.
It does. Yes, it helps with the PR. But the thing is when Darwin was being criticized for, in that same book, in Descent of Man, when Darwin was being criticized for talking about higher and lower races, and he's speaking in the language that is ubiquitous of the day. Louis Agassiz, for example, diehard Christian, and he believed that the non-white races were separate species.
Oh.
Carolus Linnaeus said the same thing.
That's horrible.
He said that there were white Europeans, black Africans, red Americans, and yellow Asians, and never that they were put on separate continents by God so that they remained separate.
Oh man,
that was the common teaching of anthropology at the time. But the thing is here Darwin turns out not to be racist, like at all. He only ever advocates for the indigenous people, right. And it would seem by some of his writings that Darwin seemed to prefer dark meat, if you know what I'm saying.
Can I ask you a quick question? Why is there timing saying at 2 hours and 5 minutes when we've only been at this for, I think, an hour less than that?
I don't see that. I see 1 hour and 2 minutes.
Okay, that's strange.
Yeah.
All right. Anyways,
this is over the time we would normally have done this, but I'm keen to continue.
Yeah, I'm okay with that too. Yeah.
All right, and I'm sorry that I haven't been seeing the. I'm seeing people I haven't seen since.
I got a full screen, so I'm not seeing the chat. So.
Yeah.
I'm also got a full screen, so I'm not distracted by other things going on my computer.
You know, the thing I just wanted to say was that Darwin. It's unfair that he was criticized for being racist. If he had been anybody else, it would have been so what? So everybody was racist at that time.
Yeah, because
the fact that they're criticizing Darwin is just ironic because he was so not. You know.
Yeah.
Anyway, and to say that Hitler was a Darwinist is like that's fucked up.
I would also say that even if Hitler said he was a Christian, he still obviously wasn't. By the fact that
why not?
Because he exterminated 6 million Jews. There's nothing
like Christian a lot of other Christians did. I mean, nobody they couldn't usually get up to those numbers, but a lot of other Christians killed a lot of other people.
Yeah, but I'm saying if for example, if I'm Mozart,
who was Constantine again? What was his job?
Oh, he was a horrible emperor. I think
exactly. Let's talk about popes now. Should we just list popes and the horrible shit that they did?
I have a lot of issue with the Catholicism anyways. You're not going to get it.
It's still Christianity now, isn't it? And for a while, between the Catholics and the Orthodox, they were all. Did you know that Dracula fought on both sides of that war? Dracula was forced to fight with Dracula fought with the Catholics, and Dracula fought with the Orthodox. At one point, he was taken prisoner. And he was forced to fight against his own people. He was supposed to kill his own people. Catholics versus Orthodox. Christianity.
Here, let me give you an analogy. That's the one I'm trying to make it. If I'm Mozart, I'm playing this, and I've come up with this beautiful piece of music, right? And let's say 3 years down the road, someone picks it up and plays it like crap. Are you going to blame Mozart or the person down the road? You know exactly what I'm talking about.
I don't know the example that you're talking about. I mean,
what I'm saying is, if you're going by the original, who is Christ, and you have Christians who are derailing from the teachings of Christ, are you going to blame Christ, or are you going to blame the Christians who are messing up his teachings?
Okay, let me paraphrase this in a way that makes sense to me. We have a first century faith healer who didn't know what the fuck, who pretended to be divine, who pretended to be a son of God and a prophet, just like every faith healing fraud we have today still does.
According to you, but okay, go on.
Name one who isn't that way.
Today, pretty much no one, but Jesus
Bingo.
was a standalone.
Oh yeah, Jesus is separate. Why? Because we can't look at his tax records. That's why.
Nice.
We can't look at anything from Jesus. That's why.
Well, you can't almost look at anything from anyone that time.
Yeah, that's right. But we can listen to the stories, and the stories reveal, here's a guy who thought that demons were real, who didn't understand the causes of the diseases that he pretended to cure, and who said a lot of stupid shit, including racist shit.
Like what?
Where he called Samaritans dogs, for example, when he told his own people that they should not deliver the word to any non-Jews because he's only here for the Jews. Yeah, he's contradicted later, like so many other aspects of Christianity.
But the thing is,
he sets one rule and then contradicts itself later on.
You're taking that out of context. Jesus says
how?
He said his mission on earth, specifically his mission, was for the Jews.
Which is why he told his people not to visit the Gentiles.
Right.
So the second generation isn't supposed to. They're supposed to be for the Jews too.
You got to look at John, Peter, everyone else who came after him was okay. Now we're going to taking this to the Gentiles. It was never Jesus' intent to keep it to the Jews only. It was his mission to come to the Jews primarily.
Except that Jesus explicitly said that it was, and then Jesus told his followers, those here standing with me right now will not even taste of death before they see me returning in the clouds at the right hand of power. Except that all those dudes had died and Jesus still hasn't come back. Jesus failed his own prediction. That? What's that?
Give me that chapter and gospel and verse.
Do I really need to look this up for you? That's embarrassing. Okay.
Well, you're going to quote. You're going to. I mean, if I talked about the origin of species, you'd be rightfully asked. You could rightfully ask. Okay, where did Darwin say that? Right.
Except I don't care. We're not based on Darwin.
Okay. Well,
Darwin discovered.
I'm just saying it's an analogy that you could hold me to it if I quoted someone like that. That's all.
Okay. If you said that Darwin said a thing, then I would need to refer to his writings. Yes, that much I'll give you. All right, give me just a moment while I look this up. Okay. This is fascinating. Showing while I Google stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm wondering where Jesus said that someone would never die. I don't remember reading that in the Gospels, and I've read them several
Mark
times.
9:1, Matthew 16:28, and Luke 9, verses 26 and 27. Jesus says, there are some of those who are standing here who will not taste of death until they see Jesus returning in the kingdom. A prophecy that failed. He's 1900 years late, and you're still sitting there eating breadsticks. Your boy ain't showing up. You've been stood up. Time to give up. You need me to recite those again?
No. I'm actually I'm in the Matthew one.
Okay.
Yeah, I gotta admit.
Now, there's a handful of apologists that have tried to say that this prophecy refers to a week later, but Jesus was to the Transfiguration. But Jesus was talking about his disciples, that some of them
Yeah, he said some of them
would still be
here.
alive. Some of them would still be alive. But we're talking about a week later when all of them were still alive. So he either failed it one way or he failed the prophecy another way. And it still doesn't work for the transfiguration either, because elsewhere in the Bible, he goes into further detail where you will see him coming in the clouds at the right hand of power, which is a funny thing to me, because when you read the Hebrew Bible, God says
Matthew 16:28 is definitely theologically problematic. I'll give you that much.
No. So there's moments when God says that there's no one beside him, and yet Jesus is saying that he's at the right hand of God, and God is denying that.
This is going to make me look into it harder, because I appreciate this, because like you, I don't believe things just on the face of it, and this is something I'm going to have to contend with. So
there's I wrote a thing where God is arguing with Jesus.
Okay.
And I want to recite that for you. Thou shalt have no other gods before me.
Right.
No one comes to the Father but through me. I am the Lord, and beside me there is no other. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God. I am Jehovah, and there is none else. Besides me, there is no God. I will gird thee, though thou hast not known me.
Well, of course, Jesus is saying he's God with the Father. So.
Yeah. That they may know from the rising of the sun and from the west that there is none besides me. I am Jehovah, and there is none else.
And Father,
so. But I tell you,
provide me with the glory that I had with you before the world was.
But from now on, you will see the Son of Man at the right hand of power, coming in the clouds of heaven. So Jesus and God don't seem to agree.
Yeah. I disagree, but I mean, we don't need to get into that for this show. But Aaron, I gotta say, it's been fun, but I want to go to sleep because I'm exhausted from this week, as you may imagine.
Yep, and I've got a Bible study in the morning. Not even kidding.
Are you serious? Okay, I thought you were being facetious for a second, but
nope, really do. I host Blasphemers Bible. So
that sounds like a hilariously fun thing to do.
It is.
Right.
I have so much fun with that, because if you were just to sit down to read the Bible as just an ignorant nobody, you just pick up the Bible and start to read it, you're not going to have a clue what half of it says.
Oh no!
I get to read the Bible with Bible scholars who know the history, who speak Assyrian,
I'm not saying you, but I mean, that's one of my biggest angst with most atheists is they don't have a clue about what the hell the Bible is contextually. They'll just drop in, slavery, this. I'm like, okay, but context. It's like if I'm reading Romeo and Juliet and I drop myself 50 pages into the story, like, what the hell, right?
So Full Speed Retreat offers $20. Thank you very much for that. And says, for the dogs or snakes or cats or avian dinosaurs, spend this on one of them.
I saw someone gave you $2 before that. That was kind. I like this.
Sadly, I was engrossed in the conversation and did not see that, and it's no longer available for me to read. So I apologize that I missed that one. All right, so
I'm gonna let you stop record before I head out, so we don't just make this awkward.
Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the recording. See you guys tomorrow, Blasphemers Bible. Mm-hmm. And just for the sake of Lawrence, I'm going to say join the Discord, but his Discord. And
thanks for having me, Aaron, and thank you also for being the most cordial non-believer I've talked to yet.
Thank you kindly, because my reputation needs that.
and I really hope that you found me to be cordial too, even if we disagree.
I did, in fact. So good on you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.